Swen, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great. Thanks for having me here. What about you? You doing good?
Yeah, doing pretty well. Just I actually had the day off today. I had to run around and do some car maintenance. Not exactly the funnest thing, but definitely needed from time to time. So you're actually at work right now, and you were saying that you just had a little bit of a last minute rush walk through the door.
Yeah, that's true. It was fun though. I met a bunch of very spontaneous individuals. They were here to pick up a couple of fins and wetsuit. One group is heading to Komodo for freediving, and the other, yeah, they're heading to Perhentian tomorrow. So a little bit of last minute shopping, I suppose.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely have some questions about the shop, but the first question I wanted to ask you is, so how did you get involved with freediving? What was your first experience like? How did you get led into it?
Right. This story is probably pretty unique. I don't think you'll hear a similar story like mine quite often. So I actually got into freediving as a way to escape corporate, more of a from a career standpoint. So prior to me becoming an instructor for freediving, I was working in a global company and I was there for 10 years. And halfway along the line, I kind of asked myself the question like, is this something that I want to do for the rest of my life? And very quickly, I've decided the answer was no. But then I didn't really stumble upon freediving so soon. I was actually looking at photography as a medium to convert, right, from working in corporate to kind of like running my own business and things like that. And as I started going into photography, I realized that it's not as easy as I thought it would be. There are a lot of experts, a lot of very, very, talented photographers out there. And I was beginning to feel like, you know what, maybe I ought to look for something else. And one day in 2018, and through social media, I came across freediving posts, and I remembered just the awe of how amazing it looked for a human being who is not typically meant to be underwater without any breathing apparatus. How graceful that looked. And I thought to myself, I really want to take photos like that. Now, that is going to be a type of photography that not many people are experts at, and I could probably do something with that. And from there on, I took my first freediving course, and the rest is history.
Oh, okay, awesome. So were you into underwater photography before you saw the freediving post, or was that something that just kind of converged at the same time?
Definitely not underwater. So I was doing a lot of landscape stuff, travel and lifestyle, portraiture, those sorts of things, but never in the water until freediving came into the picture, and I just really thought that now this is something that I'm very very keen in doing because what I was doing in the past, when we talk about landscape, portraits, lifestyle, you kind of almost get all of that in freediving photography. And since I started, I've never really taken much photos on land anymore.
That's awesome. So when you decided to pursue the freediving, how was that for? Were you naturally around the water a lot? Was it something that just came natural, or was it something kind of you had to overcome? The a fear of water. I don't know if that's the story, but was it something that just came naturally? And then also, what was the first couple of courses like? How was that?
Right. So I think it's a little bit of both. So as a kid, my parents they used to bring me to a lot of places where I'm surrounded with water, primarily vacations on the beach, on islands and things like that. So I've been exposed to the water since I was a kid, basically. But oddly, when I was around 7 or 6, I nearly drowned. So I often think back to
Oh,
that moment. Yeah. And I'm very grateful that I did not develop a trauma for being in or near the water. But when I started freediving, never was I like really, really great being in the water or underwater. But I think, my childhood of always being around the ocean and things like that definitely did help. And yeah, so the level one course, I actually did it in Malaysia in an island called Tenggol Island, and I did the Padi freediver course. It wasn't as easy as I thought it to be, but it was okay. Yeah, I didn't struggle all that bad, but it was definitely a very, very new feeling of trying to hold your breath and, adapting with the pressure, going down to, at that time, 10 meters deep. It's definitely not what I thought it would be, until I actually experienced it.
Okay, okay. No, that's awesome. That's a pretty wild story. I feel like most people, if they had a traumatic event like that, they'd probably stay pretty clear of the water. So that's amazing that you were able to overcome that, and then now you are a free diver. So that's definitely that's an amazing story. Where are you from originally?
Well, Malaysia, I get that question a lot because my name obviously don't say that. Neither does my look. But when I start talking, it gives it away.
What part of Malaysia?
Kuala Lumpur, so the capital. But the reason why I have a different name and I look a little bit Caucasian-like, or if you wish, is because my dad's German. But I was born in Malaysia and I've lived here all my life.
Okay, do you speak German?
Sadly, no. That's one thing that my dad didn't really speak to me much at home. We mostly spoke English. But on the plus side, I do speak the local languages like Bahasa, Mandarin, and Cantonese. I got my friends to thank for that.
So I'm actually my mother is from Thailand, and unfortunately I don't speak Thai, so that was one thing that I kind of regret not learning growing up. And a little backstory about me: I actually just moved to Malaysia almost a year ago now. And when I first got here, I was like, man, this is very difficult to learn the language. And then because I've learned that there's just three, if not four different languages, just kind of blended into its own unique variety of language. So it's a little bit of a challenge sometimes. So it's pretty awesome that I feel like most people I know can speak a minimum of two, if not three languages in Malaysia, just because there's such a blend of cultures here. So tell me about how you got the shop going, the involvement with the shop, and then tell me, I guess, a little bit about the shop that you have there.
Right. So the shop, it is one of our latest project, or more casually, I'll say it's our little baby. It's pretty wild, right, to think that I would end up having a shop, because never in my wildest dream I was planning to start retail. But it kind of came along the way as I started freediving, because like how I shared earlier on, I wanted to make a career out of it, but more from an instructor standpoint rather than retailing. But as I was going through my journey as a freediver, I did struggle quite a fair bit in Malaysia picking up equipments, because there's just not all that many options. My first wetsuit, my fins, they're all purchased online. I never had the luxury to try them, to test them. Is it the right size and things like that. So as I started leaning a little bit more towards making freediving a career and a business, we started kind of looking at options to bring stuff in, just so that future freedivers will not face the same challenges as what I did when I was starting out. So that's how we kind of like started. So we got really, really minimal quantities of things to start with. We didn't obviously have a shop, and for the most part, I was just selling out from my house. And I had times where I have customers and students coming to my house for shopping. And obviously that's not like the best environment and the best situation for both myself and my guests. And just lately, we have enough stock, I suppose, to come up with a presentable shop. So the shop was only launched in April this year. So really, really new.
Okay, awesome. And the name of the shop is Freedive Adventure Malaysia.
Well, the name of it is called FAM by Freediving Adventure Malaysia. So we are more casually known as FAM, just because it's easier to say it.
Okay. Okay, cool. And you are located in Kuala Lumpur.
Yep, Cheras to be exact.
Whereabouts?
Cheras.
Okay, I am not very familiar. I've only been down to KL I think 3 times, and actually the last time I was there was when I met you at the expo, and then I actually purchased some fins from the shop.
All right. Well, thanks for that.
And no, so yeah, I'm very. I don't know much about the KL area, so I need to make it down there a little bit more, but I'm not sure if you know, but I'm based in the Penang area, so it's like on a good day, about a 4 to 5 hour drive. Short plane ride, but like, definitely a little bit of a longer drive.
Oh no, I was saying that I think Chihao was telling me that you were from Penang. Yeah, it's a nice place. I really should visit Penang more often. I think the last I was there was probably, I don't know, 6, maybe 5 years ago. Good food. Do miss it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very good food. I feel like I've gained like 5 kilos, 6 kilos since I moved here. So yeah, definitely the food's a little bit too good. Okay, so where do you mostly do your training at? I'm assuming, do you start out in the pool in the area that you're in, and then you will travel for the actual open water portion of the classes?
Yes, that's exactly how we do it. So when a student registers with us, we will start them off with theory. So they will get access to their theory materials. They would read in advance, and then we would meet at the pool. We'll cover the important topics, questions that they may have regarding certain topics, and then we'll run the pool class. And after that, we would then head over to one of our beautiful islands in Malaysia for the open water part of the course. So the beauty of it is that by doing it this way, and we also have quite a bit of flexibility for our students to choose from in terms of their timeline, but someone who feels like they need more practice can always practice enough before they go to the island. So this is how we kind of like do it. And yeah, I think for many, they appreciate the fact that they don't have to rush a course.
Awesome. Tell me a little bit about, because looking on the website, you offer 3 different agencies. Is that correct for freediving? So why would me not knowing much about freediving, like how would I decide which one to go with? Or do you recommend, or what's the scenario there?
Okay, so how we have 3 agencies or education systems isn't really something that we've done by choice. It kind of like came along the way. We didn't intentionally do it, but just along the path, we kind of like got on board and things like that. And how that kind of came about is that personally for me, I'm very passionate about the AIDA education system, primarily because they've been around the longest and they are a non-profit organization. So with AIDA, I just feel that the content is really established, and it's quite noble to think that the profits that this organization earn, being non-profit, those funds goes into further development of freediving and research and things like that. So I think that sticks pretty much with me, and that's the reason why I was very passionate about AIDA. Now on the other hand, I'm also a PADI freediving instructor, and that, I guess it's a little bit of a, because I started my level 1 as PADI freediver, so there's a little bit of an attachment there, and I thought, why not, right? Why not be a PADI freediving instructor as well? Now I'm a freediving instructor for both PADI and AIDA. I do have another colleague of mine, Chihao, which you've met at the fair, and he is very performance driven, and that's why he gravitates towards Moshanov, because Moshanov is very performance driven. And their content is pretty in-depth as well. And if you're the kind of person who wants to get into competitive freediving, Moshanov would be a good consideration. They are also, the only agency that offers the no fins discipline as part of their course. So in their level 1 or wave 1, you get to experience no fins. And if you happen to go for wave 2, now you have a performance requirement to meet to be certified as a wave 2 freediver. So we kind of like have all these different agencies based on our personal preference, and we like to think that our customers would have similar preferences like we do. So why not, have more options for people.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing because I've just done a basic, I think it's called basic freediving class, and then I took mine with SSI, and it definitely. Freediving is something that I've wanted to do for quite a while. I mean, I'm a scuba diver, but freediving, scuba diving, it's in the same world. So once I opened up the door and looked into freediving, I was like, man, I didn't realize that there was so many different agencies. So I was kind of confused on which route to go. So you're saying the one of them is like if you want to get into competition style freediving, that would be the agency to go to. I don't even want to butcher the name. It starts with the M. What is it again? I'm really bad with pronunciation.
So they are known, well, the name is Moschanov. They are a Russian brand.
Molchanov. Okay. And I mean, I've done a little bit of research. The Alexia, is that his name? He has a world record. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So he's one of the best freedivers in the world, and his full name is Alexei Moshanov. So this entire system is his, and because of their competitive nature of being world-class athletes in the freediving world, their content is very much based off that. And interestingly, Moshanov also has a level 4, which not many other agencies have. And one of the passing requirements for the Wave 4 is that you would need to dive as deep as 50 meters to certify as a Wave 4 freediver.
Holy cow. I'm like 50 meters on scuba, let alone freediving. I'd be a little bit, yeah, that's pretty wild. Tell me about what's all involved when you start getting into competitive freediving. Like how tell me a little bit about that.
So I'm not too much a competitive freediver myself, but I've done a little bit of intensive, so to speak, training. But I think one of the first thing that somebody would want is that you want to approach freediving as a sport, right? And then comes the entire lifestyle that you would need to kind of adopt when you're taking this route. So that would mean even taking care of what you eat and drink, having enough rest, because those things are really, really important. And when you are taking on the performance route or competitive freediving, there's a lot of trainings that's involved. You really gotta look into little details, and all those things is gonna matter. But for example, when I'm doing a big dive, I would typically not eat at all in the morning. So I'll make sure that I have a really good meal the night before for dinner, just to get all the energy and the nutrients that I need. But on the next day, when I have a morning dive, I skip breakfast, just so that my stomach is idle, is not working in terms of digesting food, and anything of sort. And I go that way, and that to me is a preferred way for me, if I'm going to do a little bit more of a big or performance dive.
Okay, what's a big or performance dive for you?
Well, for example, like when I was going through my AIDA instructor course, part of the requirements would be to dive to 40 meters. So that to me is huge. There are other stuff like you gotta rescue somebody from 25 meters, including a 50-meter surface tow with rescue breaths. Yeah, imagine doing that with an upset stomach. If you had a bit of spicy food or too much alcohol the night before, it's not gonna help.
That's yeah, I could definitely see how that wouldn't make the situation a little bit better. All right, well, tell me a little bit more about AIDA. Is that, you said AIDA? So what is it? AIDA 1 Introduction to Freediving. So what could I expect from a course like that?
So with AIDA, because AIDA 1 is, like you said, is introduction. So that's where it kind of confuses people a little bit, because AIDA 2 is basically level 1. So if you compare AIDA 1 and AIDA 2, it's essentially the same thing. Everything is the same. The only difference is that in AIDA 1, you do not have any passing requirements. So you would go through the course, you would experience all the disciplines and things like that. And by the end of that experience, you are basically certified AIDA 1. But if you want to be more officially certified where you got to meet certain targets and numbers, then that's where IDA 2 comes into play. So it's technically IDA 2 is level 1, and that's where you have the performance requirements to meet.
How long does it usually take to get from, like, is that something that's offered? Do people jump right into 2 if they want to get the certification, or how does that work out? Do you have to take 1 before 2?
No, you don't really have to take 1. You can go straight for 2, just because it's level 1 anyway. But I would say like the IDA 1 is more suitable for somebody who maybe, they just want to have fun, right? They're not into working too hard to meet passing numbers, but they just want to experience what freediving is like. So IDA 1 could be a good option. Or another scenario would be maybe, let's say, for example, I go to Greece for a vacation, and then I sign up for IDA 2. But due to some situation, I wasn't able to meet my passing requirements. Rather than leaving empty-handed, I could ask the instructor to certify me as IDA 1. So I still get a certification, and not go back empty-handed. But then again, on the other hand, your courses are transferable. So let's say, imagine if I was in Greece, I wasn't able to finish my IDA 2. I just need to get a completion form for my instructor, and at my next destination I could pass it on to the new instructor, and this new instructor can carry on my course. So I technically don't have to restart, and I can continue my course anywhere around the world.
And then when you want to advance to go to, well, I want to say 3, but I guess it would be 2 and then 3, the advanced freediver and the master freediver. What type of things would you need to do in order to achieve that?
Right. So to keep things simple, let's call it level 1, level 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So let's say somebody is a level 1 freediver who wants to go into level 2. I definitely always recommend for someone to do a little bit more freediving in between the 2 levels. So after you finish your level 1, put in a few more training sessions or island trips and things like that. Get comfortable to the targets or performance requirements for level 2 before you kind of like jump straight into it, because it's a pretty big jump, right? Because in level 1, for example, or IDA 2, you need to get to 12 meters, but for IDA 3 or level 2, you need to get to 24 at least. And when you pass 24 meters, well, sorry, not 24, but as you kind of like reach 20 onwards, your normal equalization, or what's known as Valsalva, doesn't quite work anymore, just because the compression is so much that you don't really have that air to use in your lungs anymore. So now you have to switch to Frenzel. Now some people can do Frenzel equalization easily, but for the most part, it takes a little bit of time and practice for somebody to pick it up, because it's a little bit more technical. There are a lot of muscles that you typically don't use, like your gluteus and your soft palate, on a day-to-day basis, and you got to use those things and be very aware of how to control those muscles to Frenzel equalize. So yeah, so there's a little bit of that involved, and I think that's a pretty big part of successfully completing your level 2, being able to equalize comfortably to 20 milliliters and beyond. And furthermore, all the performance requirement increases, right? In level 1 for IDA or IDA 2, you got to hit 2 minutes for static. But in IDA 3, you got to do 2:45 and all those kind of things. So you definitely want to train a little bit more before you go for the next one.
I'm sure you run into this a lot. What are some of the biggest fears that people have when, so say you're just speaking to someone, they're like, oh, I'd like to try this, but I'm not sure. What are some things that you run into that you want to, I guess, talk about, saying like, you don't need to worry about this, you don't need to worry about that? Like, what are some things that you could talk about?
So often we get a lot of students, they're a little bit worried about the depth. Because 10 meters or 12 meters is pretty daunting, right? For a beginner, to go down without any breathing apparatus, it's almost a 3 or 4 stories building, right? And usually, how I kind of like help the student ease their nerves a little bit is that it was very helpful if we do our dives from the shore, where you can see the bottom. So it's less scary that way. So we usually try not to jump off the boat into the blue. We do it a little bit shallower. So that's helpful, and I always make it a point that every time they go down, I go down with them, just so that they know that I'm next to them at all time. And sometimes, if needed, I'll just tell them, right, just to make it even clearer that, don't worry about it. I'm next to you. We'll do this dive together. And one thing that usually is a bit of a psychological barrier is how they feel that they do not have enough breath to get all the way down and up. But typically, on average, a dive down to 10 or 12 meters, you go down and up in around 30 seconds. But prior to having to do that, in their static, they would have done 1.5, 2 minutes, and some even 3 minutes, right? So if you have done 2 to 3 minutes on static, what's 30 seconds? So when you help them realize that, they usually get a little bit more comfortable and confident that they're going to get down there and make it back up safely.
I was trying to think of this earlier. What are some of the myths that you hear about freediving that you could debunk? Like when someone talks about, like I can relate it to scuba diving. Someone's like, oh, you could get the bends or this or that. And it's not that it's a myth, but what are some things that like you hear that you're like, no, that's not true. that's not the case. If you can think of any off the top of your head, I don't know if you just see common ones or whatnot. So
yeah, so there is actually one, and it just happened a couple of hours ago. I didn't correct it, but so this myth or misconception is that a lot of people seem to think that the reason somebody can't equalize in freediving is because they are not doing Frenzel and they're using the Valsalva approach, and that's the reason they can't equalize. Now, that is true for greater depths because of the compression and the fact that you have, your lungs are at residual volume, and typically, you can't use that volume anymore, and hence you're not going to be able to Valsalva equalize, because Valsalva equalization is essentially pushing your diaphragm inwards, and that pushes the air from your lungs all the way up to your ears. So that's the misconception that I typically get. But, I think a lot of the truth in why somebody can't equalize is not so much on the technique, but the fact that their soft palate is close. So right behind our hard palate, behind our teeth, lays our soft palate. And a lot of people, when they go upside down, it's a very uncomfortable, unusual feeling to be, right? You're upside down, you're underwater, you're in a breath hole, and our body has this reflex that it almost shuts your airways and some of your muscles just as a defense mechanism that you don't die, so to speak, right? So a lot of people have that reflex. And when your soft palate is closed, that air is not going to go through. The air is not going to get to your nasal cavity. It's not going to go through your eustachian tube, and it's not going to reach your ears, or your middle ears to be precise. And that is the reason why many can't equalize. But so it's not so much that, I'm doing Valsalva, I can't equalize. You can Valsalva all the way to 15, 20 meters. But people seem to think that, oh no, this person is not doing Frenzel, so that's why they can't equalize.
I was just thinking about something, a misconception that I had. I don't know if you heard this before or if you've heard it from time and time again. But before I took my freediving class, I would hear people like, oh, you have to take a lot of big, deep breaths before you hold your breath and go underwater. And that's not, there's a technique to it, obviously, that I've learned, but it's not just, I'm going to hyperventilate and then just hold my breath and go underwater. So I don't know, is that something that you hear a lot? Like someone's like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. I just, have to take a big, deep breath and then go down. But so there's techniques that you can work on to practice to extend your breath hold time, which I'm sure you obviously go into in the classes that you teach.
Right. So this is I don't think we get that so much in Malaysia, but I think it's more commonly present in skin divers, spearfishers, because a lot of these individuals, they don't start off with a course. So they kind of like pick up these techniques somewhere along the line, and they just think that's the way to go. And interestingly, I don't know how far back this goes, but in the past, in freediving education where there's not enough research and understanding, hyperventilating was taught as the way to go. Like in courses, and instructors would say that, like, okay, this is how you take your last breath or your breathe up per se. But as the sport matures, as people start getting better understanding, they soon realize actually, hyperventilating brings more risk and unwanted or negative conditions, rather than, if you relax, just breathe normally before you take your last breath. So for example, when you hyperventilate, you're actively breathing rather strongly. And what that would do is to also elevate your heart rate a little bit more as compared to if you're just breathing normally in a relaxed state. Now your heart rate is going to be a little bit lower. Now, as we know, when the heart rate's lower, it's not going to consume as much oxygen. So that's one of the differences. There is a more technical logic behind why we shouldn't hyperventilate. I don't know if we should go there because it gets pretty technical. Let me know if you want me to go into it.
If you're okay going into it,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's a good learning. You can kind of give us not the short version, but the because it is very interesting. Because I actually didn't know that it was something that was taught in the past, so that's news to me. Because I think that was, or maybe that's how I came about learning about it. And then when I took my basic course, it was like, no, you don't do that at all. Like, that's the worst thing you can do before getting into the water. But if it's too long of a thing, you don't have to go into it. But if you're open to talking about it, I'm definitely interested.
Of course, sure. I mean, it's not going to be that long to explain. So this also rides along a little bit with one of the questions that you just asked about misconceptions. So on the misconception, a lot of people seem to think that the urge to breathe and your contractions that you feel when you hold your breath, these are all triggered by decreasing oxygen. But the truth is, it's not. Your urge to breathe and your contractions that you feel in your diaphragm or in your stomach is basically a trigger due to increasing CO2. Because when you hold your breath, that CO2 is not leaving your body, and your body creates these actions and these sensations because it wants to remove that CO2 that's building up in your body. So now, how is this related to hyperventilating? So when an individual hyperventilates, what essentially they are doing is that they are flushing out more CO2 than what you normally have in a normal state. So when we're idle like this, sitting down and resting, we always have some CO2 because our body is always changing that gas, right, from O2 to CO2. So when you hyperventilate, you're actually flushing out more CO2 than your body typically is accustomed to. You won't feel it at that point of time, but what happens is that when you hold your breath, you're going to feel easier. You're going to feel that it's more comfortable because your CO2 levels were lowered in the first place. Now, on hindsight, it's a good thing, right? You're going to feel more comfortable for a longer period of time before your urge to breathe and your contractions starts to come and things like that. But what many people don't realize is that your oxygen level remains the same. When you hyperventilate, you do not increase your O2 level in your body, and it drops the same way as it would even if you hyperventilate or you don't. So now you're in this situation where your oxygen levels continues to drop like it normally would, but your alarm, your sensors are delayed. So it could lead you in a situation where before your body could warn you that you're on a critically low level of O2, you pass out, you black out, because that CO2 is essentially that alarm, right? Your body can't really tell you that your oxygen levels are depleting, but it can tell you that your CO2 is rising. But it's just that, without knowing that, you're going to walk straight into a possible blackout. Our body is unique in a way whereby our CO2 is the one that's telling us, the fact that we are low on air, until very much where you're almost blacking out. Then you start feeling symptoms that you would have learned and read in your basic freediver course, like tinglings, numbness, feelings in your extremities, intense heat, especially around your neck area and your ears and things like that. So when you start feeling those things, now that is where your O2 is really, really low, and that's only when the time your body can actually warn you. But yeah, it's a little bit late. We kind of want and need to depend on our CO2 to tell us that we are reaching that critical zone.
That's good information, so I really appreciate you going into that. And then just to real quick, to bring it back a little bit to the beginning. So you still do underwater photography. What do you shoot with?
Okay, yeah, so that is actually, just like how we kind of started off the podcast, one of the big reasons that I got into freediving, right, to capture those images. To start, I was just meddling around with my GoPro. I think it was a GoPro 5, I suppose. No, 4. That's what I started with, a GoPro 4, and now we have the 11. But yeah, that was that was when I just started, just to see how it feels shooting underwater and things like that. But obviously, I very soon realized that the GoPro doesn't really satisfy the image quality that I was seeking for or I was looking for. So I then looked into underwater housings for my camera. So you remember how I also explained that I was shooting a lot of land-based photos. So I was using, and I'm still using the very same camera. I'm using the Sony A7 III, and so that is the exact same kit that I use underwater, but obviously paired with an underwater housing so that my camera stays alive and I bring it underwater.
That's a great camera. So I started with the A7R2, and I still have it. And I do just it's a very it's a aggressive hobby, I would like to say. I really do enjoy nothing underwater. And then and late last year just picked up the A7 IV,
Oh, nice.
which is a really nice camera. Yeah, and I was like, oh man, I when I got the new one, I was like, oh, I'll go buy a housing for the old one, and then that way I'm not bringing my super expensive camera in the water just in case something happens. But the 2 is just old enough to where not many companies make the housing for that anymore.
Right.
So it's kind of a bummer. And then yeah, underwater photography is I mean, land photography is a whole beast, and then once you get into underwater photography, that's just like opening up a whole nother. I'm like, man, I already have a few expensive hobbies I don't need to do anymore. So, what do you like to shoot underwater? Like, just mostly freediving stuff, or macro, or what's your like go-to? What's your favorite type of stuff to shoot?
Right. So I do actually all my underwater photography on Graceful while I'm freediving and not on Scuba. So that kind of takes me away from macro, where you really need to stay still, and really spend a decent amount of time at the bottom. So I'm a little bit more on wide angle freediving photography. So usually of people, but obviously it's always a bonus where you get an opportunity to take a photograph of a freediver interacting with a marine animal. Like what more commonly available in Malaysia would be the green turtles in Perhentian. So quite often when I'm out with my students in Perhentian for our courses, we would put some time aside where we would go to what's called Turtle Point. So Turtle Point is interesting in the sense that it's sandy bottom with seagrass, and that's one of the main diets of a green turtle. So almost always you get green turtles scraping the bottom, and it's not that deep for even beginners, where it's just 6 to 7 meters. And some of the best photos that I've taken are actually freedivers with turtles at that particular spot.
Where can I check out some of your work?
So you can go to our website at www.freedivingadventuremalaysia.com, and one of the tab that you see on the right side says the Submerged Gallery, and there's where you would see some of my so to speak, proudest photos.
Okay, cool. I will definitely leave a link in the episode description for you. And then just a couple of quick questions before we sign off. What would be the best piece of advice that you could give to somebody that is wanting to get into freediving or somebody that just took their first freediving class, they're kind of new to it? What's the best advice that you could give to them? Well, I guess that's a two-part question. For people that are not into freediving, looking to get into it, and then people that have taken a freediving course and looking to do more.
So for those who have not taken any class and want to get into it, I think the biggest advice, and I think this is really one of the best advice that you can get, is to take a course, because the course is gonna give these individuals the skills to do it safely and enjoyably, and on top of that, the knowledge, right, of the risk involved with freediving. Because a lot of time, a lot of media and things like that, they depict freediving as one of the most dangerous sports in the world. Well, as much as I feel that that's a little bit of a overkill, but I do think it can be very dangerous, especially if you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So when you actually take on a course, that course is going to equip individuals with that knowledge and that skill to do it safely. And of course, more enjoyably, of course. So that's like the best advice I can think of for anybody who wants to get into freediving. Now, for those who have just started, I think my advice would be, as much as I want people to come to my shop, but don't spend too much on equipment, but rather spend a little bit more money on training, right? So put some time aside, put some money aside, train with different instructors even, just to get a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more skill, a little bit of extra time in the water, just to better your skill. Because, a course typically is a, 2 to 4 days course, and how much you're going to learn in that few days is not going to be that much. But when you further invest in your education, you'll find that everything feels so much easier. You meet new people along the way. You're going to be able to share new knowledges and learn things from even, non-instructors, right? But just meeting new people, like, explore new sites and things like that. So I think definitely, yeah, don't get too caught up in getting the most fancy equipment or going straight into level 2 and things like that. But yeah, take some time, chill, go and do some fun dives, do a little bit of training along the way, and freediving will become much more enjoyable, and it opens you up to more experiences that way.
Amazing advice. I love that. And real quick, I guess, if someone has not taken a freediving course and they wanted to take a freediving course, is there any required equipment? Because I know when I took my scuba class, it was like, oh, you have to have your own mask, fin, snorkel. Is a lot of that provided for somebody that's never taken a course before?
Yes. So for the most part, a lot of dive centers would provide you with everything you need, but of course you want to always check before arriving at the location and realizing that you don't have a piece of equipment that's not provided. But I can speak for our school, where we provide everything for our students. So I often tell my students on the first day of class that you don't have to purchase even a piece of equipment. Everything can be on rental, and it's already part of our course fee anyhow. And you can finish your entire level 1 course without having to buy anything. But of course, if you do prefer your own equipment, like a lot of people prefer their own snorkel, just because, the mouthpiece and things like that. Yeah, you can always get simple stuff to start with. I think, the simple things that you can start with if you're looking to get your own stuff would be a mask and snorkel. But to start, you don't really need carbon fins or long freediving fins. You can even, do your level 1 course with appropriate scuba fins. So why do I say appropriate? Some fins are a little bit too heavy and stiff, which may not be a good idea. But there are scuba fins that, we use or can use to finish our level 1 course.
Well, I want to thank you very, very much for coming on to the show today, just because it's been very informative for me. Like I said, I just took a very basic class. It was a while ago, and I really enjoyed it, and it's something that I know I want to pursue more. So kind of like what you're saying, just meeting you and hearing some of the information that you're talking about has been absolutely great. So thank you very, very much for coming on to the show.
It's my pleasure, Nick. Thanks for having me. I mean, this is also, it's pretty wild for me, right? I've never been on a podcast, so it's a very interesting experience, and I'd like to extend my thanks to you as well for making this happen.